Phoebe Bridgers has been doing pop-up shows and playing new music recently, and she's got her first real acting role in Lance Oppenheim's movie Primetime, which is scheduled to be released in September. So I figured it's a good time to share some movie recommendations inspired by Phoebe Bridgers. I'll get the obvious ones out of the way first. She's one of the performers in I Saw the TV Glow, and there's Boy Genius the film. She plays herself in Between Two Ferns the movie. She covered That Funny Feeling from Bo Burnham's Inside. Her debut solo album, Stranger in the Alps, got its title from the edited for TV version of The Big Lebowski when a line is changed to "Do you see what happens when you fight a stranger in the Alps?" She's featured on the song Silk Chiffon by Muna and appears in the music video, which was heavily inspired by But I'm a Cheerleader. She covered Daniel Johnston's song Peekaboo in the tribute documentary Honey, I Sure Miss You. She said Hereditary is the best horror movie, and in that same interview she said Pan's Labyrinth was a 10 out of 10. And in that interview she also mentioned The Lost Boys, 13th, Frankenweenie, and Twilight. She covered Goodbye to Love for Minions, The Rise of Gru. I'm not going to list every movie that uses one of her songs because there are quite a few, but I'll include more of those on my Letterboxd list. But Smoke Signals and I Know the End are in I Used to Be Funny, and Motion Sickness, Scott Street, and Killer are in Someone Great. She references The Wizard of Oz in I Know the End with the lines 3 clicks and I'm home, there's no place like my room, and go down with my hometown in a tornado. The music video for Smoke Signals was inspired by Carnival of Souls. I always call Smoke Signals the Twin Peaks song because the way the baritone guitar is used sounds similar to the show's opening theme. I Know the End has a lot of apocalyptic imagery and this idea of the end of the world that makes me think of Miracle Mile and Melancholia. The opening verse of Graceland 2 conjures up images of a psychiatric ward, which makes me think of Girl Interrupted. But the description of friendship in that song makes me think of Thelma and Louise. Moon Song makes me think of It's a Wonderful Life because of the line, "If I could give you the moon, I would give you the moon." But it also makes me think of Synecdoche, New York for the line, "You are sick and you're married and you might be dying," because there's a line in the movie where a character says, "I'm really sick and I think I'm dying. I have a kid and I'm married." She has a few songs where she describes being in a relationship with someone older, as well as songs that describe unrequited love that make me think of a short film about love. Since she's a big Elliott Smith fan and her song Punisher is about him, I want to recommend the documentary Heaven Adores You. In Punisher, there's the line, "The house where you lived with Snow White," which is a reference to the Snow White cottages where Elliott Smith once lived, and there are scenes in Mulholland Drive that take place there. I know Punisher is about Elliott Smith, but the chorus, "What if I told you I feel like I know you, but we never met," calls to mind Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Little Fish, and Last Year at Marienbad. A lot of the imagery in her music videos makes me think of Donnie Darko. Between the skeleton outfit and in the video for Garden Song, someone sits next to her in a rabbit suit with a bloody eye. This one's a TV show, not a movie, but ICU always makes me think of the Free Churro episode of BoJack Horseman. Speaking of TV show, she co-wrote the song Type of Guy for Daisy Jones and the Six, another TV show instead of a movie, but a few of her songs make me think of The X-Files, especially Chinese Satellite with the lyric I Wanna Believe. Adding to the alien theme, that song also makes me think of Close Encounters of the Third Kind and Mysterious Skin. Scott Street kind of reminds me of After Sun because the second verse captures the sad awkwardness of catching up with someone and the repeated line, "Anyway, don't be a stranger." Speaking of which, the line, "Anyway, don't be a stranger" in Scott Street kind of makes me think of the last act of La La Land or the end of Before Sunrise. Waiting Room reminds me of Letter from an Unknown Woman with its depiction of desperation and pining for someone. The relationships described in Savior Complex and Moon Song remind me of Phantom Thread. Motion Sickness kind of makes me think of Middle of the Night for the way it depicts a young woman dating an older man, but the way she describes trying to get out of that relationship makes me think of The Invisible Man. And Education and Fish Tank also depict relationships with an age gap and a power imbalance that makes me think of Motion Sickness. Speaking of which, I feel like The Worst Person in the World captures that post-relationship clarity described in Motion Sickness, and I feel like Priscilla also captures that sort of relationship. The Souvenir reminds me of Moon Song. Parts of Kyoto make me think of Lost in Translation because of the way Phoebe sings about being in Japan and feelings of imposter syndrome. But the animosity toward her father in Kyoto makes me think of Out of the Blue and Short Term 12. These are painfully obvious ones, but Chelsea makes me think of Sid and Nancy, and Killer makes me think of Dahmer. I keep thinking of the line, "I will wait for the next time you want me like a dog with a bird at your door" from Moon Song. And it reminds me of Gia because in this movie, someone describes the main character by saying she was like a puppy, she was like, "Love me, love me, love me." Would You Rather kind of makes me think of Persona and Mulholland Drive just for the lines "we have the same face" and "quarantined in a bad dream." Last year I posted a video about the movie Twinless because in that movie someone makes a joke about how motion sickness is tied to the gene for being queer, which stuck out out to me because I'm extremely prone to motion sickness. And a few people commented mentioning Phoebe Bridgers because of the song Motion Sickness. The third verse of Smoke Signals makes me think of Carolina Caroline and Badlands. I know this one doesn't match the vibe of the song at all, but every time I listen to I See You and I hear the lyric, if you're a work of art, I'm standing too close, I can see the brushstrokes, I can't help but think of the Monet line from Clueless. I already started working on this list before I went to see Obsession, so it's probably just because I was listening to a lot of Phoebe Bridgers music right before seeing it, but a character in that movie says something that reminded me of the outro of Halloween. I feel like this list has been all over the place and doesn't quite capture Phoebe's vibe, so I'm gonna rapid fire list off movies that I think either match her vibe or the vibe of her lyrics, and those are The Billboard said the end is near. I turned around, there was nothing there. Yeah, I guess the end is here.